Brianna stared down at the venomous post, her hands trembling. Karen's lies had gone viral, painting her as a vindictive, unethical lawyer. Brianna's heart raced as she read the comments. Hundreds of people calling for her disbarment, her reputation in shambles. How could this happen? She whispered, sinking into her office chair. Just yesterday, she had won a high-profile case against Karen's Homeowners Association, halting their abusive fines and property seizures. Now that victory had been turned against her. Brianna replayed the courtroom showdown in her mind. The way Karen's eyes had narrowed, her nostrils flaring with rage as the judge ruled in Brianna's favor. She should have known then that Karen would retaliate. But Brianna had been so focused on delivering justice, she'd let her guard down. Now that lapse in judgment threatened to destroy everything she'd worked for. Her fingers flew across the keyboard as she frantically drafted a response, but each version sounded hollow, ineffectual against the tidal wave of online vitriol. A knock at the door startled her. "Come in," she called, hastily minimizing the browser window. Her partner, Michael, stepped inside, his brow creased with concern. "I just saw the post. Are you okay?" Brianna shook her head, unable to find the words. She passed him the laptop, watching his expression darken as he read Karen's venomous lies. "This is defamation, pure and simple," he growled, his hands clenching into fists. "We need to sue her for every penny she has." "I know," Brianna said, shoulders slumping. "But that could take months, even years. In the meantime, my career is ruined." She met his gaze, her eyes pleading. "I can't let this destroy everything I've built." Michael's jaw tightened. "Then we fight back. Now." He pulled up a chair beside her, his voice lowering to a conspiratorial murmur. "Here's what we're going to do." Brianna listened intently as Michael laid out his plan, her heart pounding. It was risky, bordering on unethical, but she couldn't deny the appeal. If it worked, it could neutralize Karen's attack and salvage her reputation. "Are you sure this will work?" she asked, a tremor in her voice. Michael nodded, his expression grim. "It has to. We can't let Karen get away with this." Brianna took a deep breath, steeling herself. "Okay, let's do it." They sprang into action, moving with a sense of urgency. Brianna composed a meticulously crafted response, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Michael worked tirelessly, combing through old court records and news articles. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they reviewed their work one final time, double-checking every detail. Brianna felt a surge of adrenaline as she hit send, her stomach churning with a mix of nerves and determination. The next morning, Brianna checked her phone anxiously, waiting for the fallout. It didn't take long. Within minutes, her inbox was flooded with messages, from angry Karen supporters, bewildered bystanders, and a few cautiously intrigued individuals. She shared the most promising leads with Michael, and they began the delicate process of damage control. Reaching out to key influencers, they carefully laid the groundwork, sowing seeds of doubt and nuance. As the day wore on, Brianna could feel the tide slowly turning. The initial vitriol gave way to more measured responses as people began to question the veracity of Karen's claims. Still, the damage had been done, and Brianna knew it would take time to fully repair her reputation. Late that night, as she lay awake staring at the ceiling, a knock at the door startled her. Heart pounding, she peered through the peephole, then flung the door open in relief. "Michael, what are you doing here?" He swept past her, his expression grave. "We have a problem." Brianna felt her stomach drop. "What is it?" "Karen's not taking this lying down," Michael said, his voice hushed. "She's filed a restraining order against us." Brianna's breath caught in her throat. "A restraining order? On what grounds?" Michael paced the room, his brow furrowed with concern. "Harassment, intentional infliction of emotional distress, the whole 9 yards. She's painting us as vindictive, unhinged stalkers." Brianna sank into a nearby chair, her mind racing. But we were so careful, so measured in our response. How could she possibly justify a restraining order? You know Karen, Michael said grimly. She'll twist and manipulate anything to suit her needs. And unfortunately, the court system often sides with the aggrieved party, at least initially. Brianna felt a sinking sensation in the pit of her stomach. So what happens now? We have to fight this, Breh, Michael said, his voice steely with determination. We can't let her bully us into silence. Our reputation, our careers, everything is on the line. Brianna nodded, her jaw set. I'm in. What's the plan? They worked through the night, poring over legal precedents and strategizing their next move. As the first rays of dawn crept through the blinds, they had a solid plan in place. The next day, Brianna and Michael stood before the judge, their arguments precise and impassioned. They meticulously laid out the timeline of events, exposing the holes and inconsistencies in Karen's claims. Brianna could feel the judge's skepticism growing with each piece of evidence they presented. When it was Karen's turn to speak, her voice trembled with false indignation. These two have been harassing me nonstop. I'm in fear for my safety. They're trying to ruin my life. Brianna gripped the edge of the table, her knuckles turning white. How dare this woman stand there and lie through her teeth after what she'd done? The judge's eyes narrowed as he studied Karen. Your claims of harassment seem rather vague, Ms. Wilson. Can you provide any concrete evidence to support them? Karen faltered, her gaze darting around the courtroom. Well, they've been posting things about me online, trying to turn people against me. Brianna couldn't resist a bitter laugh. Your Honor, we're merely responding to the defamatory lies Ms. Wilson has spread about me. Everything we've done has been in defense of my reputation and professional standing. The judge's expression softened, and Brianna felt a glimmer of hope. I see. In that case, I'm inclined to deny the restraining order request. However, I would caution both parties to refrain from any further inflammatory behavior. This matter will be best resolved through the proper legal channels. As they left the courthouse, Brianna felt a weight lift from her shoulders. They had won this round, but she knew the battle was far from over. In the days that followed, Brianna and Michael worked tirelessly to repair the damage done to Brianna's reputation. They reached out to influential figures in the legal community, sharing evidence of Karen's deceit and manipulation. Slowly but surely, the tide began to turn in their favor. Yet, for all their efforts, Brianna couldn't shake the sense of unease that lingered. She knew Karen was a formidable opponent, and she couldn't shake the feeling that the other woman was plotting her next move. One afternoon, as Brianna was poring over her notes, her phone rang. Her heart sank when she saw the caller ID. It was Karen. What do you want? Brianna snapped, her voice laced with barely contained anger. I want to make a deal, Karen replied, her tone surprisingly calm. I'll drop the restraining order if you agree to a public apology and retraction. Brianna's eyes narrowed. And why on earth would I do that? You're the one who defamed me, not the other way around. Because if you don't, Karen said, her voice dripping with venom, I'll make sure you never work in this town again. Brianna's blood ran cold. Are you threatening me? Call it what you will, Karen purred. But you know I have the power to make your life a living hell. So, what's it going to be? Brianna's mind raced as she weighed her options. She knew that giving in to Karen's demands would only embolden the other woman, but the thought of losing everything she'd worked for was too much to bear. I need time to think about this, she stammered. You have 24 hours, Karen said, her voice cold and unyielding. After that, all bets are off. The line went dead, leaving Brianna feeling nauseous and helpless. She knew she had to tell Michael, but the words caught in her throat. How could she admit that she was considering caving to Karen's demands? Steeling her resolve, Brianna made her way to Michael's office, her heart pounding. As she relayed the conversation, she watched his expression darken with fury. Absolutely not, he growled. We can't let her win, Bri. We have to fight this, no matter the cost. Brianna sighed, her shoulders slumping. I know, but what if she follows through on her threats? I can't risk losing everything I've worked for. Michael leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. You're not going to lose everything. We're in this together, remember? We'll find a way to beat her at her own game. Brianna nodded, feeling a flicker of hope reignite within her. Okay, let's do it. They spent the rest of the day brainstorming their next move, determined to outmaneuver Karen and protect Brianna's hard-earned reputation. As the sun dipped below the horizon, they had a plan in place, one that would test the limits of their ethics, but might just be their only hope. The next morning, Brianna and Michael arrived at the courthouse, their nerves on edge. They knew that their plan was risky, but they were running out of options. As they took their seats, Brianna couldn't help but notice Karen's smug expression. The other woman seemed confident that she had the upper hand, and Brianna felt a surge of determination to prove her wrong. When the judge entered the room, Brianna took a deep breath and stood to address the court. Your Honor, we have a proposal to resolve this matter amicably, she began, her voice steady and confident. The judge raised an eyebrow, gesturing for her to continue. Ms. Wilson has agreed to drop the restraining order in exchange for a public apology and retraction from me, Brianna said, her gaze briefly flickering towards Karen. The judge frowned. And what are the terms of this proposed agreement? Brianna squared her shoulders. In exchange for the retraction and apology, Ms. Wilson has agreed to make a substantial donation to a local domestic violence shelter. Karen's eyes widened, and Brianna could see the wheels turning in her mind. She knew that the other woman was expecting a simple capitulation, not a quid pro quo arrangement. I see, the judge murmured, stroking his chin thoughtfully. And what is the amount of this donation? Brianna glanced at Michael, who stepped forward. Your Honor, we're proposing a donation of $50,000 to the Willow Tree Domestic Violence Shelter. The courtroom erupted in a shocked murmur, and even the judge looked taken aback. Karen's face had turned an alarming shade of puce, and Brianna had to suppress a triumphant grin. That's an impressive sum, the judge said, his brow furrowed. And what assurances do we have that Ms. Wilson will follow through on this agreement? We've taken the liberty of drafting a legally binding contract, Michael said, producing a thick stack of papers. It outlines the terms of the agreement, including a timeline for the donation and the wording of the public retraction and apology. The judge took the contract, his eyes scanning the pages intently. Brianna held her breath, praying that their gambit would pay off. After what felt like an eternity, the judge looked up, his expression unreadable. Very well. I'll approve this agreement, provided that the terms are met within the stipulated time frame. Brianna felt a wave of relief wash over her, and she could see the same emotion reflected in Michael's face. They had outmaneuvered Karen, at least for now. As they left the courthouse, Brianna couldn't help but feel a sense of triumph. They had managed to turn the tables on the other woman, securing a positive outcome for the community in the process. But she knew that the battle was far from over, and that Karen would undoubtedly be plotting her next move. In the weeks that followed, Brianna and Michael worked tirelessly to ensure that the terms of their agreement with Karen were upheld. They closely monitored the donation to the Willow Tree Shelter, verifying that the full $50,000 had been transferred as promised. Meanwhile, Brianna crafted a carefully worded public apology and retraction, taking great care to strike the right tone, remorseful, yet firm in her conviction that she had done nothing wrong. The statement was released to local media outlets, and gradually, the tide of public opinion began to shift in her favor. But Brianna couldn't shake the feeling that Karen was biding her time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She knew the other woman was not one to take defeat lightly, and she braced herself for whatever retaliation might be coming. Her suspicions were confirmed one morning when Michael burst into her office, his face etched with concern. "Bri, you need to see this," he said, thrusting a stack of papers into her hands. Brianna scanned the documents, her heart sinking. It was a lawsuit. Karen was suing her for abuse of process and malicious prosecution. How is this possible? Brianna asked, her voice shaking. We fulfilled our end of the agreement. This should be over. Michael paced the room, his brow furrowed. Apparently, Karen's claiming that our extortion of the $50,000 donation was an abuse of the legal system. She's alleging that we used the threat of the restraining order to coerce her into an unfair settlement. Brianna felt a surge of anger. That's complete and utter nonsense. We negotiated in good faith, and the judge approved the agreement. I know, Michael said, his expression grim. But you know how these things work. Karen has deep pockets, and she's not afraid to drag this out for as long as it takes. Brianna sank into her chair, her mind racing. She knew that fighting this lawsuit would be an uphill battle, and the financial and emotional toll could be devastating. But she couldn't back down, not after everything they'd been through. We have to fight this, she said, her voice laced with determination. We can't let her win. Michael nodded, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. That's what I was hoping you'd say. I've already started gathering evidence and preparing our defense. Brianna felt a surge of gratitude for her partner's unwavering support. Together, they would face this challenge head-on, no matter the cost. As the days turned into weeks, the legal battle intensified. Brianna and Michael pored over documents, interviewed witnesses, and built a rock-solid case to counter Karen's allegations. They knew that every move they made would be scrutinized, but they were determined to prevail. Finally, the day of the trial arrived, and Brianna steeled herself for the fight of her life. She knew that the outcome would have far-reaching consequences, not just for her career, but for her very sense of justice and integrity. The courtroom was a cauldron of tension as Brianna and Michael took their seats, their eyes locked on Karen and her high-powered legal team. The other woman wore a triumphant smirk, and Brianna felt a surge of anger coursing through her veins. As the judge entered and the proceedings began, Brianna's heart pounded in her chest. She listened intently as Karen's attorney laid out their case, painting Brianna and Michael as unscrupulous, power-hungry lawyers who had abused the legal system for their own gain. But when it was their turn to present their defense, Brianna and Michael were relentless. They methodically dismantled every one of Karen's accusations, providing damning evidence that the agreement had been reached in good faith and with the full approval of the court. Brianna could feel the judge's gaze boring into her as she recounted the timeline of events, her voice steady and unwavering. She knew that this was the moment that would define her career, and she refused to back down. As the day wore on, the tension in the courtroom reached a fevered pitch. Both sides presented their arguments with unwavering conviction, each determined to emerge victorious. Brianna could feel the sweat beading on her brow as she waited for the judge's final ruling. Finally, the moment of truth arrived. The judge cleared his throat, his expression unreadable. This has been a complex and highly contentious case, he began, his gaze sweeping the room. Both sides have presented compelling arguments, and I've carefully considered the evidence and testimony presented before me. Brianna held her breath, her fingers digging into the wooden table in front of her. Ultimately, I find that the defendant's claims of abuse of process and malicious prosecution are without merit, the judge continued, his voice firm. The agreement reached between the parties was negotiated in good faith and approved by this court. There is no evidence to suggest any wrongdoing on the part of the plaintiffs. Brianna felt a wave of relief wash over her, and she could see the same emotion reflected on Michael's face. They had won. But as the judge continued to speak, Brianna's elation turned to dread. However, I must express my deep concern over the use of financial coercion, even in the service of a worthy cause, the judge said, his brow furrowed. While the outcome of this case may be just, the means by which it was achieved are troubling, and set a dangerous precedent. Brianna felt her heart sink as the judge delivered his final ruling. While he had dismissed Karen's lawsuit, he had also ordered Brianna and Michael to pay the $50,000 donation out of their own pockets, effectively negating the agreement they had so painstakingly negotiated. As they left the courthouse, Brianna couldn't help but feel a sense of bittersweet triumph. They had won the battle, but at a significant personal cost, and she knew that the scars of this ordeal would linger, reminding her of the fine line she had walked between justice and ethics. In the weeks that followed, Brianna and Michael grappled with the aftermath of the court's ruling. While they had emerged victorious in the defamation case, the order to pay the $50,000 donation out of their own pockets was a bitter pill to swallow. Brianna couldn't help but feel a twinge of resentment towards the judge's decision. She understood the reasoning behind it, but it still stung to know that they had played by the rules and yet were being punished for it. As they pored over the financial fallout, Brianna couldn't help but wonder if they had made the right choice. Could they have simply capitulated to Karen's demands and avoided this entire ordeal? The thought made her stomach churn, but she couldn't deny the very real impact it was having on their practice. "We did the right thing, Bri," Michael said, his voice firm. "Even if it cost us in the short term, we upheld our principles, and that counts for something." Brianna nodded, but she couldn't shake the lingering doubt. "I know, but at what cost? We're going to have to dip into our savings just to cover that donation, and who knows what other fallout there might be." Michael reached across the desk, giving her hand a gentle squeeze. "We'll get through this, I promise. We're a good team, and we'll come out of this stronger than ever." Brianna managed a wan smile, appreciating his unwavering support. Still, the weight of the decision hung heavy on her shoulders. In the months that followed, Brianna and Michael worked tirelessly to rebuild their practice and regain the trust of their clients. They took on pro bono cases, volunteered in the community, and doubled down on their commitment to ethical, principled lawyering. And gradually, the tide began to turn. Word of their triumph over Karen's attempts to silence them spread, and Brianna began to receive an outpouring of support from colleagues and community members alike. As she sat in her office one afternoon, scrolling through the latest glowing reviews and endorsements, Brianna felt a sense of pride swell within her. They had weathered the storm and emerged stronger and more resolute than ever. "Looks like all that hard work is paying off," Michael said, leaning against the doorframe with a smile. Brianna nodded, her gaze meeting his. "It was worth it, in the end. We did the right thing, no matter the cost." Michael crossed the room, pulling her into a warm embrace. "That we did. And I'm proud of you, Bri. You stood your ground and fought for what's right, even when it wasn't easy." Brianna felt a weight lift from her shoulders as she returned the hug, finally allowing herself to feel the full extent of her relief and pride. They had won the battle, but the war had left its scars. Yet, as Brianna looked to the future, she knew that they were stronger for it, more resilient, more principled, and more committed to the pursuit of true justice. And that, to her, was worth far more than any financial or reputational victory.